"I wish it need not have happened in my time," said Frodo. "So do I," said Gandalf, "and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." J.R.R. Tolkien, The Fellowship of the Ring, Book 1, Chapter 2, The Shadow of the Past. Welcome to Lore and Logos. And wow, what an epic quote from Tolkien.
Yes, there are several amazing quotes in The Lord of the Rings.
Tolkien really was a master writer. Well, as Kevin mentioned, the story that we will be looking at today is The Lord of the Rings. Before we look at a truly brief outline of the books, let's discuss the quote from the cold open.
I think the advice offered by Gandalf to Frodo would be good for a lot of people here.
I wholeheartedly agree. I can truly say that this is my favorite quote from J.R.R. Tolkien. It has so much depth and truth to it. As the quote points out, many people wish that the difficulties that come upon them had not happened during their lifetime. I automatically think of the 2 world wars and the COVID pandemic. I am sure that many who lived or died during those times wish that the difficulties that they had to live through had happened during a different time period or someplace else.
Also pointed out by the quote, it is not up for us to decide when we live or what events take place while we live. That is up to God to decide. As Christians, we can trust that God will always do or always allow what is best for us in the big picture.
The last section of that quote is the part that I believe is the most important. Gandalf tells Frodo that since we cannot change the events and trials in our life, we can only decide what we will do in response to them. Gandalf also gives the deeper and somewhat hidden warning that we only have the time that God gives us. We don't have forever to make sure that our response to the events in our lives are the correct ones. That means we need to correctly and quickly respond to the trials in our lives. The correct response is the response that will bring glory to God. In 1 Corinthians 10:31, Paul, inspired by the Holy Spirit, says, "Whether then you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God."
So, as Tolkien points out through the mouth of one of his characters, we need to trust God with what trials, afflictions, and tribulations come upon us. God has us here for a reason, and we need to trust Him. We also need to respond correctly to the trials that come. We need to be focused on glorifying God in all that we do, even when persevering through trials.
I think that 1 Peter 1 really shows that perseverance through trials honors and glorifies God. In this you greatly rejoice, even though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been distressed by various trials, so that the proof of your faith, being more precious than gold which is perishable, even though tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. 1 Peter 1, 6-7.
Now let's move on into our brief summary of the story found in The Lord of the Rings. Before we begin, I want to make it clear that this is only a short, concise outline. This is not all of the details.
We highly recommend and encourage listeners to read or reread the 3 books that make up The Lord of the Rings. The 3 books' titles are The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King.
Tolkien originally wanted all 3 books published as one large volume. But because of the post-World War II paper shortages in Great Britain, and because of high printing costs, his publisher, George Allen and Unwin, decided to split the manuscript into 3 volumes to keep prices reasonable.
So keep in mind that the 3 printed books are not in any way standalone novels. Each contains a section of the larger narrative. They continue right where the previous book left off.
Before we begin the brief summary, I want to mention that we will be mentioning spoilers. So if you haven't yet read The Lord of the Rings, be forewarned.
The Fellowship of the Ring begins with Frodo Baggins inheriting the One Ring from Bilbo and learning from Gandalf the Grey that the Lord of the Rings, the Dark Lord Sauron, is searching for it. Frodo's journey then commences and he flees the Shire with Sam, Merry, and Pippin, his close friends. They escape the Nazgul and most of them make it safely to Imladris, also known as Rivendell. At Rivendell, a council forms bringing together elves, men, dwarves, and hobbits to accompany Frodo on a perilous journey to destroy the One Ring in the fires of Orodruin or Mount Doom, which was in the land of Mordor where Sauron dwells. The Company of Nine, including Frodo, are referred to as the Fellowship of the Ring, hence the name of the book. As the Fellowship of the Ring journeys through the dark mines of Moria, Gandalf defeats a demon of the deep and casts it down a chasm, only to have it drag him down with it. Later, a fellow Fellowship member, Boromir, a man of Gondor, succumbs to the One Ring's temptations, leading to the splintering of the Fellowship of the Ring.
The second volume, The Two Towers, follows the divided paths of those who had been in the Fellowship of the Ring. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli hunt the Uruk-hai that captured Merry and Pippin, while Frodo and Sam continue alone towards Mordor. Gandalf is sent back to Middle-earth once again and returns as Gandalf the White. The Two Towers mentioned in the titles are one of Sauron's dark fortresses, and Orthanc, Saruman's Black Citadel. The volume is named after the union of the Two Towers. Gandalf, along with Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, free King Theoden of Rohan from the dark magic of Saruman, an evil wizard. They then lead King Theoden and his people to victory at the Battle of Helm's Deep. Meanwhile, Frodo and Sam capture Gollum, a creature who had been twisted and corrupted by the One Ring before it came into the possession of Bilbo, and then Frodo. Gollum reluctantly agrees to lead Frodo and Sam to Mordor through secret paths. Merry and Pippin, along with the Ents, or tree herders, destroy Saruman's stronghold of Isengard. Gollum betrays Frodo and Sam, leading them into the lair of the giant cunning she-spider Shelob.
In the third and last volume of The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, Sauron strikes out at Gondor to destroy the world of men before any resistance can be mustered. He attacks Minas Tirith, intent on completely annihilating the city. But Aragorn, a descendant of the Númenórean kings of old, commands the army of the dead to rise and fulfill their oaths. The Rohirrim see the beacons of Gondor lit and rush to Minas Tirith. Outside of the city of Minas Tirith, on the fields of Pelennor, the massive forces of Mordor clash with the riders of Rohan and the army of the dead. The combined forces of Gondor, Rohan, and the army of the dead defeat Sauron's forces at Pelennor Fields, but not without great loss. Still hoping that Frodo and Sam can succeed in the perilous journey to Mount Doom to destroy the One Ring, Aragorn leads the remaining armies to the Black Gate of Mordor to draw Sauron's forces and attention out of Mordor. But it was an ambush. Sauron knew they were coming and had his superior forces surround Aragorn's army. Meanwhile, Frodo and Sam, having barely escaped Shelob's lair with their lives, reach the fires of Mount Doom. Frodo, in a split moment, is consumed by the ring and refuses to destroy it. Gollum, having tracked them through Mordor's wastes, leaps on Frodo and bites the ring and the finger it is on, free from Frodo's hand. In the struggle, Gollum plummets, along with the One Ring, his precious, into the fires of Mount Doom. The One Ring is destroyed. Sauron, who had bound his life force to the One Ring, perishes, and his forces flee in terror as Aragorn's army leaps into the fray with renewed vigor. Later, the hobbits return home to find that the Shire was taken over by Saruman. With their newfound skills, they liberate their land. Sam gets married and starts a family, and Frodo, after recording the history of the War of the Ring in the Red Book, sails west to the Undying Lands to find perfect peace. Please remember that this is only a brief summary. You really have to read the books to be able to get a good understanding of all the events and character growth that takes place within them.
The first thing that we will look at today is an interesting observation that countless people have made after reading through The Lord of the Rings.
We will look at the prophetic, priestly, and kingly attributes of Gandalf, Frodo, and Aragorn respectively. An amazing book that I think really looks at this well is The Messiah Comes to Middle-earth by Philip Ryken.
I think that as a Catholic, J.R.R. Tolkien wove some Christian themes into his books, without it being allegory. I know we discussed this some in our other podcast on the Silmarillion, so I won't rehash everything here and now, but I did want to mention again that while Tolkien disliked allegory, he appreciated literary works that taught truths, even if those truths are somewhat hidden sometimes.
Tolkien even went on to indicate to a friend that The Lord of the Rings is fundamentally a religious work of literature, but you sometimes have to dig to find the religious symbolism woven through it. The Lord of the Rings is still a tale of adventures, friendships, sorrows, and joys, but it also has deeper meaning to it than some of the modern fluff that we read, and that makes reading The Lord of the Rings more enjoyable to me.
Now, back to the prophet, priest, and king reflection of the threefold office of Christ.
Yeah, so essentially the threefold office, or munus triplex, refers to the three distinct roles Jesus fulfills to redeem humanity: prophet, priest, and king. Unlike C.S. Lewis's Aslan figure in Narnia, Tolkien subtly reflected these three biblical roles across three separate characters in The Lord of the Rings: Gandalf, Frodo, and Aragorn. This is most likely because, like we mentioned, Tolkien disliked allegory. Let's first look at how Jesus combined all three roles into one persona.
In the Old Testament, individuals were anointed to serve God in one of three specific capacities. In the New Testament, like Chanoch said, Jesus united all three into one persona. A prophet speaks God's truth, reveals divine wisdom, guides the lost, and warns against evil. Jesus acts as the ultimate prophet through his teaching, preaching, and revealing God's nature.
A priest offers sacrifices to bridge the gap between God and humanity. Jesus acts as the high priest by offering himself as the ultimate sacrifice, bearing the weight of human sin, suffering, and interceding on behalf of others.
A king rules, restores order, establishes peace, and defeats the enemy. Jesus acts as the King of Kings who conquers death and evil, setting up an everlasting kingdom. Now let's look at those three roles in Middle-earth. In the prophetic role, Gandalf the Grey speaks wisdom, guides the Fellowship, dies fighting the Balrog, and is resurrected with greater power to finish his mission.
Fitting into the role of the priest, Frodo voluntarily carries the heavy burden of the ring, symbolic of corrupting sin, endures immense spiritual suffering, and sacrifices his own peace to save the world.
In the role of King Aragorn, the rightful heir who claims his ancestral crown leads the armies to victory, heals the sick, which was a royal trait, and ushers in a golden era.
Tolkien weaves these three archetypes throughout the story to show how different forms of virtue and sacrifice are required to defeat evil.
Let's look a little closer at these three Lord of the Rings characters and their prophetic, priestly, and kingly roles in the Middle-earth.
So let's start by looking at Gandalf as the prophet. Gandalf rarely uses brute force. Instead, he inspires wisdom, he exposes Saruman's lies, and rallies the free peoples of Middle-earth to act. Also, like biblical prophets or Jesus who faced persecution or martyrdom, Gandalf falls into Moria fighting a demon, only to be sent back by the higher power, Eru Ilúvatar, clothed in white to complete his divine errand.
So next we'll look at Frodo as the priest. So first, he was the burden bearer. A priest steps into the breach on behalf of the innocent. Frodo takes on a burden he did not create and suffers spiritual and physical torment so others would not have to, as shown in the books. The next one, self-sacrifice. Just as a priestly sacrifice leaves the priest's change or consumed, Frodo is permanently wounded by the journey.
Last but not least, let's look at Aragorn as the king in Middle-earth. So, like the title of The Return of the King indicates, he is a returning monarch. Aragorn's arc directly echoes the messianic promise of a hidden king returning to reclaim a fallen kingdom. He also has the hands of a healer, which is an interesting connection to like Jesus' miracles. In Middle-earth lore, the hands of the king are the hands of a healer. Aragorn's ability to heal people like Éowyn and Faramir with the herb Athelas proves his royal legitimacy just as much as a sword, which really, like I mentioned, echoes the miracles of Jesus.
Gandalf, Frodo, and Aragorn echo the threefold office of Christ. It is obvious once you look deeper.
Next time you read The Lord of the Rings, look for these character traits. None of these characters is perfect like Jesus, but they do all have character traits that are similar to some of Jesus's. Something else in The Lord of the Rings that really caught my attention was all of the close friendships that you see develop and grow throughout the books.
That's true. There are some very close relationships between characters in The Lord of the Rings.
Several that come to mind immediately are the friendships between Frodo and Sam, between Legolas and Gimli, between Merry and Pippin, and of course, the one between Aragorn and Arwen.
Some examples of bad friendship could include the friendship between Sauron and Saruman, and between Grima Wormtongue and King Theoden.
Yes, there are both examples of friends who truly love each other, and of those that only use their relationships to manipulate and to benefit themselves.
Let's start by looking at the relationship of Frodo and Sam.
Yes, let's look at how biblical love, seeking and acting in the best interest of the other, drives the heroic relationships in The Lord of the Rings, while self-interest and exploitation ruin the bad relationships. So, if we start looking at Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee, in the book, Sam does not accidentally stumble into Gandalf's plans. He, Merry, and Pippin form a secret conspiracy because they notice Frodo's distress and gather information to ensure he does not venture into danger alone. Unlike in the film adaptation, Frodo never turns against Sam or sends him away on the steps of Cirith Ungol. Frodo trusts Sam completely throughout the entire journey, recognizing Sam as his steadfast anchor.
He also bore their weight. Sam's love is practical and sacrificial. He starves himself to give Frodo rations, stays awake and watch so Frodo can rest, carries the physical weight of Frodo up Mount Doom, and guards Frodo's spiritual dignity when the ring's burden becomes overwhelming.
He also puts Frodo's healing first. At the end of the novel, true love requires Sam to let Frodo go. Knowing Frodo cannot find physical or spiritual healing in the Shire due to his lingering wounds, Sam supports Frodo's departure for the Undying Lands, placing Frodo's ultimate well-being above his own desire to keep his best friend nearby.
Some people think that Frodo and Sam are gay. Well, they are not gay. Some people make clear assumptions about some of the characters in The Lord of the Rings, but Tolkien did not intend for the relationships to be that way. Men and hobbits can have good, strong friendships without being gay.
That's very true. Another, Legolas and Gimli, some people also say they're gay, but obviously, once again, they are not gay. So, talking about Legolas and Gimli's friendships, their friendship really overcomes an ancient enmity between the elves and the dwarves. In Lothlorien, Gimli's humble, noble devotion to Galadriel softens Legolas's heart. Both choose to put aside deep-seated ancestral hatred between elves and dwarves to seek mutual understanding and respect. And they have pacts of mutual honor as well. Their friendships grow through shared appreciation of things. They make a famous pact to visit the places held dear by the other. Legolas agrees to explore the beauty of the glittering caves of Aglarond with Gimli, and Gimli agrees to walk the vast forests of Fangorn with Legolas.
Yeah, and then in the appendixes, after the death of King Elessar, Aragorn, Legolas builds a gray ship and takes Gimli with him across the sea to the Undying Lands, an extraordinary grace granted to a dwarf, proving Legolas's lifelong commitment to his friend's spirit. He probably was the first dwarf to go.
I'm sure he was the first and probably only dwarf to ever do that. And once again, I mentioned this at the beginning, some people say that Legolas and Gimli are gay. They are not. People make queer assumptions about the characters in The Lord of the Rings, but that does not mean Tolkien intended it to be that way. He did not. Men, like Kevin mentioned, can have good, strong relationships without having to be gay.
The next friendship we will talk about is the one between Merry and Pippin.
Yeah, Merry-otic, Brandybuck, and Peregrine Took.
In the novel, Merry and Pippin are not foolish thieves caught stealing vegetables like actually Frodo kind of was.
Yeah, it was actually Frodo in the books when he was a youngster had stolen some, I think it was mushrooms from Farmer Maggot.
Yep. But they are sharp, brave hobbits who willingly choose to leave the comfort of the Shire out of deep love and concern for Frodo.
Yes. And when they get separated, each seeks the good of the realm they serve. Merry serves King Theoden out of a genuine affection and loyalty, while Pippin steps up to serve Steward Denethor in Gondor.
Yeah, when they went home, they used their experience and maturity to lead the liberation of the Shire from Saruman's thugs.
Also known as the Scouring of the Shire.
They restored peace for their people rather than seeking personal glorification. They live out the rest of their lives in close fellowship and choose to be laid to rest beside Aragorn and Gondor.
The last good friendship that we will look at today is the friendship and close relationship between Aragorn and Arwen. It's really an amazing tale of love that I enjoyed looking at deeper, but we can't spend a lot of time on it here. So as detailed in the Tale of Aragorn and Arwen, Appendix A, Elrond sets a strict condition. Arwen may not marry any man lesser than the king of both Gondor and Arnor. Aragorn accepts this daunting responsibility not out of pride, but to be worthy of her and to restore Middle-earth. And just before we go any further, I do want to mention Aragorn is a Númenórean man, so he has long life, but he is not immortal. Arwen is an elf, but since she is a descendant of Elrond and some others, she has the choice between immortality and mortality, but she is elvish in nature.
Arwen willingly surrenders her elven immortality, choosing the gift of men. To share her life with Aragorn offers Middle-earth hope. That's true love right there.
Yeah, she gave up her immortality to have the gift of men, also known as mortality, to be able to, live with Aragorn and offer Middle-earth hope. Arwen also is a great encouragement to Aragorn. While Aragorn fights in the south, Arwen hand-sews the royal crown banner of Elendil in secret and sends it to him. When Aragorn unfurls it at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, it signals the return of the king and brings hope to a dying world. Spoiler alert, they end up marrying after Aragorn is crowned king. Now let's look at a couple bad relationships between people in The Lord of the Rings that are filled with selfishness and manipulation on both sides.
The first one is between Sauron and Saruman. Rivalry in the seat via the Palantir. In the text, Saruman uses the Palantir of Orthanc, foolishly believing he can match minds with Sauron and negotiate an alliance of convenience. Saruman secretly plots to steal the One Ring for himself, ordering his Uruk-hai to bring the hobbits to Isengard unsearched, so he can overthrow Sauron. Meanwhile, Sauron treats Saruman as a temporary tool, fully intending to destroy or enslave him once his usefulness expires.
Yeah, there's zero genuine good in their relationships. Their relationships are built entirely on pride and utility. Neither desires the good of the other, resulting in paranoia, backstabbing, and ultimate destruction.
It's self-love for themselves.
Exactly. That is not how you build relationships or maintain relationships. Okay, so now let's look at the relationship between Grima Wormtongue and King Theoden. Grima Wormtongue psychologically and emotionally poisons King Theoden into doing what Grima Wormtongue wants. In the book, Grima's influence is not a magical possession or exorcism, but years of insidious, manipulative counsel. He uses subtle lies to convince an aging Theoden that he is weak, senile, and friendless, actively eroding the king's mental and physical health.
He has a lot of self-serving motives too. Grima acts entirely for personal reward, seeking Rohan's wealth, power under Saruman, and the forced possession of Eowyn. He drains Theoden's spirit and isolates him from those who truly love him, such as Eowyn.
Grima Wormtongue eventually comes to a very destructive end. Because Grima's affection was purely parasitic, he ends up completely broken, ultimately murdering Saruman in a fit of rage before being shot by hobbit archers in the Shire.
Well, as we have pointed out, there are many good examples of both bad and good relationships to be found in The Lord of the Rings.
Yes, and I would encourage you, listener, to evaluate your friendships to see if you are truly loving your friends or just manipulating them for your own good.
Let's now turn to look at the Rings of Power in The Lord of the Rings.
This look at the Rings of Power covers the history, holders, mechanics, and biblical/theological parallels of each set of rings based on Tolkien's The Silmarillion, The Lord of the Rings, including the appendixes, and Unfinished Tales. Let's first look at a little bit of the creation and context of the Great Rings. Before diving into each tier, keep these core historical points in mind. So, the first is the forging, created during the Second Age in Eregion by the Gwaith Myrddin, elven smiths led by Celebrimbor, who, by the way, was grandson of Fëanor. So they were forged in the Second Age, so I believe in Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings happened in the Third Age. Is that correct? Yeah.
So, Sauron disguised himself as a Nettar, yet he was deceiving those elves. and to teach the elves ring making, intending to enslave them through his master art. He just wanted to control them through his rings.
Exactly. Yeah, he disguised himself as a lord of gifts, bringing knowledge to the elves, and taught them how to make and imbue power with these material things, these rings. But in teaching them, he was able to, maybe make them do things that would allow him to have the power of the rings to be able to control them.
And so he deceived them greatly because all of their great rings, so the elven ones, the dwarven, so on and so forth, were linked to the one ring that he wielded because they were made using Sauron's foundational craft.
Yeah, his power and his understanding and his teaching led to the main rings of power being all tied to the one ring that he later forged in Mount Doom. So now, I don't know if any of you have read the poem by Tolkien in the front of most of the Lord of the Rings books about the 3 rings for the Elven Kings, the 7 for the Dwarf Lords, the 9 for mortal men doomed to die, and 1 for the Dark Lord, Sauron. So we're just going to go through in that order and look at these different rings and like I mentioned, who held them, the mechanics, and any biblical and theological parallels that we see around these rings. So let's start with the 3 elven rings.
So the three for the Elven Kings under the sky. So they were forged by Celebrimbor alone after Sauron left Eregion. So Sauron, he never physically touched them, which meant they were untamed by his personal corruption, though they were still bound to the fate of the One Ring which he held.
So that meant that when the One Ring was destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom, the 3 elven rings and all the other rings that were bound to the One Ring, their power faded and they no longer had their functions aside from just being a beautiful trinket on their hands.
So their primary function was preservation, healing, and warding off the decay of time. As shown like Gollum, he lived for a really long time and he just didn't want the ring to burn up because then he would die, and he said he turned to dust and stuff. And so it was not daunting.
And I think the elven rings, because elves themselves are immortal, they will not die naturally. So the ring didn't really do that much for them, but it allowed them to like almost pause time where they live. So I know like Galadriel and Lothlorien, these trees grew so high, everything was just so lush and beautiful, exactly. But then when the One Ring was destroyed and the power faded, the elves eventually then left Middle-earth because they did not have that control over time that they had before.
Yeah, none of these rings actually were used as a weapon, though.
Yes, none of the elven rings were used for domination or weaponized warfare. They were used for more, like Kevin mentioned, the growth, healing, preservation, warding off the decay of time, that sort of thing. They were not used for warfare, unlike the One Ring and some of the other rings.
So one of the elven rings was Vilya, the Ring of Air, or also called the Sapphire Ring. So it looked like a gold band set with a brilliant blue sapphire, widely considered the mightiest of all the 3 elven rings.
Yes, and its primary bearers were first Gil-galad, the High King of Noldor. He received it from Celebrimbor for safekeeping during the War of the Elves and Sauron. Then later, he entrusted Elrond with Vilya before the last alliance, which was good because I believe Gil-galad, did he die during that war?
Yes, he did.
So Elrond kept the ring hidden in Rivendell, or as I mentioned before, Imladris, throughout the Third Age.
Yeah, and people used it. It preserved the beauty of Rivendell. It healed wounds like Frodo's Morgul Blade wound and granted foresight and wisdom.
The second elven ring, Nenya, the Ring of Water, or the Ring of Adamant, was a ring forged of mithril. So that's the highly prized dwarven, often sought after it was in Moria. That's why they delved too deep in Moria, because of the mithril deposits there. Frodo, he received it from Bilbo, had a mithril shirt. It's like impierceable, very, very strong. So Nenya, forged of mithril and set with a shimmering white stone, the Stone of Adamant.
The primary bearer of Nenya was Galadriel. It was given directly to her by Celebrimbor. she held it continuously in Lothlorien.
Yeah, I think I mentioned before that Galadriel had one of these rings in Lothlorien and was using it to kind of keep the time, or almost slow down the age of decay and stuff in Lothlorien. So the power and use of it, like I mentioned, kept Lothlorien unstained by time and protected its borders from enemy eyes and intrusion. It also heightened Galadriel's innate power of perception and spiritual sight. She used this as she gazed across the land to kind of see the direction of things and wars.
Sauron.
Exactly. She was kind of watching Sauron from afar. When he was in Dol Dur, regaining his power, Galadriel felt that there was some evil power growing in Dol Dur, because Dol Dur and Mirkwood is actually, I think, in the southern portion of the same group of trees that also make up Lothlorien. Lothlorien is, I believe, more north, and then Mirkwood and Dol Dur are situated in the southern part of the forest.
More closely to Moria.
Yes. So it's just a huge swath of trees at the base of these huge mountains. So anyway, so that's a simple geography lesson about Lothlorien and Mirkwood. Though, please check for yourselves, because I'm not sure that's 100% accurate.
So the third and last of all the great elven rings was Narya, the Ring of Fire and the Red Ring, or the Red Ring. So it was set with a fiery red ruby. That's basically what it looked like.
Yeah, it was just a ring set with a fiery red ruby. So the primary bearers were... It's somewhat uncertain, because Celebrimbor initially sent it to Gil-galad or Círdan at the Grey Havens. Gil-galad, as we mentioned before, was more in western Middle-earth, but they were both at the Grey Havens at this time. Círdan the shipwright, was at the Grey Havens, so it was sent to the Grey Havens. Either Círdan the shipwright or Gil-galad had the ring. We don't know 100% on that. So then it ended up being given to Gandalf. Upon Gandalf's arrival in Middle-earth, Círdan recognized his divine origin as an Istari. So, like we mentioned in the Silmarillion, he was a spirit that was contained in a old man's body, so that it would limit his power, so that he could help Middle-earth without having undue power over people, like Sauron did.
So the powers...
So Círdan or Gil-galad, whoever had the ring, gifted Gandalf Narya to aid his mission.
Yeah, unlike destructive fire, Narya's power was spiritual warmth, so it kindled hope, courage, and resilience in cold or despairing hearts, which was a really good, helpful tool for Gandalf's ministry across Middle-earth.
Yes, I believe it was crucial to his mission. And I do want to point out, like Kevin said, it was more of a spiritual warmth. It was not a destructive fire. I think it's an interesting perspective, like when you see Balrog, the demon of the deep, fighting Gandalf, this spiritual power in this body. Both of them are spiritual creatures, the demon and I guess an angel, like in Middle-earth.
Both with fire powers, right?
Yes, but one, the Balrog, has this destructive fire for destroying things, and it's just obvious that he's bad, he's a demon. But then Gandalf, on the other hand, is not like a fiery creature. He looks like just an old man, but he has that warmth to him, this love and spiritual warmth that can kindle hope and courage in other people. And I just really liked the comparison between those two, that the Balrog is just this evil fire, but Gandalf has this good fire that will help encourage people. Fire can both be destructive and be a help.
So the next set of rings, the 7 for the Dwarf Lords. So Sauron reclaims these rings during the sack of Eregion and distributed them to 7 leaders of the Dwarf lands. And I'll point out that it's interesting to note that the House of Durin believed Durin III received his ring directly from Celebrimbor. So the physical effect on the dwarves didn't grant invisibility or make dwarves wraiths like the ring wraiths, the Nazgul.
So like the rings that made the men wraiths, yeah.
Dwarves were created by Aiul to be naturally resilient to spiritual domination.
Yes, they're resilient in more ways than just that, though. They're very resilient, as you can see in Gimli and the other dwarves in The Hobbit.
Especially Thorin in the movie, portrayed to be a tough character.
He was. Yeah, in the movie, they portrayed them fairly well in the movie. So the corrupting effect that the rings had on the dwarves, even though it did not make them wraiths, it did have a corrupting effect on them. It inflamed their natural desires of greed, pride, and obsession with wealth. And I think this is obvious with the 7 great hordes that were mentioned in some of the books by Tolkien, that the dwarves, they had these 7 hordes, and those were attributed to the 7 dwarf rings. So the one that comes to mind, and I believe is probably the most famous one, is the ring that, Thorin's grandfather had. And originally the wealth that they had in Erebor was in the great city in Khazad-dûm in Moria, but it was later transferred to Erebor. Like Kevin will mention in a moment, some of them were destroyed by dragons, like Smaug in The Hobbit, but Smaug did not destroy the ring that Thror and then later Thrain, his son, received. Thrain, Thorin's father, was captured and brought to Dol Guldur, and the ring, the dwarven ring that he had, was taken from him. So Sauron actually regained that ring.
So the fate of the other 6 rings, so 4 were consumed by dragonfire, and then 2 were recaptured by Sauron.
So that was
I already told you about Chanoch already told you about the last one. It was taken from Thrain.
Yeah, the last one to be accounted for was the one taken by Thrain II in the dungeons of Dol Guldur.
So the next set of rings were the 9 for the men. So they were given by Sauron to human kings, sorcerers, and warriors of the Second Age,
including 3 noble Númenóreans.
Yes. And so the men, unlike elves, are mortal, and so extending their lifespans artificially causes horrific spiritual and physical decay. Like, I think Gollum, like, he's an example. He was...
Yeah, hobbits, they live long, but they don't live forever.
And Gollum was like a hobbit.
Yes, but he wasn't completely a wraith, but he was like in between a wraith and a hobbit. So let's look a little at their transformation into wraiths. The 9 rings granted invisibility to their wearers, shifting the wearer into the unseen world, shifting them to like the spiritual side of the world. And it enhanced their power and wealth initially by giving them, with their power, they were able to exert that power over their subjects and the kingdoms surrounding them to gain all that wealth and influence over them.
Yes. Over time, the wearer's physical bodies fade away entirely, turning them into the Nazgul, ring wraiths.
Yes, they were completely subjugated to Sauron's willpower. Even when Sauron did not physically hold the 9 rings, he held them captive through the One Ring.
As you know, all the 9 were bound to the One Ring.
Yes, they were bound to it. So, once again, when the One Ring was destroyed, the Nazgul and Sauron, who bound his life force to the ring, were destroyed along with it. So now let's look a little closer at what a wraith is in Tolkien's lore. To understand the Nazgul, it is essential to understand the unique nature of wraithhood in Middle-earth, which differs significantly from standard fantasy ghosts or undead monsters like zombies.
Yeah, let's look at the mechanism of fading, so the dual realms. So in Tolkien's legendarium, reality consists of the seen, the physical world, and the unseen, the spiritual realm. Mortals naturally exist in the seen world.
But what happens here is the forced shift into the unseen. Wearing a ring of power draws a mortal wearer temporarily into the unseen realm, making them invisible to normal eyes that are still in the seen realm.
Permanent unhousing. So if a mortal uses a ring continuously over centuries, hundreds of years, the body does not die, but its physical substance slowly fades away entirely. The person becomes permanently bound to the unseen realm, a wraith.
Now let's look at some of the key characteristics of a wraith. So, their life is not a true life. It's an unnatural extension of somewhat life, but it's not really true life. A wraith is not dead, nor is it truly alive. It suffers an unnatural stretching of existence, living a hollow, exhausted continuation of life without joy, rest, or spiritual growth. Like I said, it's not a true life.
Yeah, and they don't have free will.
Yeah, they lose that as well.
Yeah, as the physical body dissolves into the unseen, the bearer's mind and soul are steadily overcome by the Dark Lord's willpower. So eventually, independent identity vanishes, leaving only an instrument of Sauron's desire to do whatever he pleases with.
Yes, and I think that really goes along with sin too. If we just fill ourselves continually with sin and do that again and again and again, we will lose our identity and only be an instrument of evil desire, and will be an instrument of Satan. So now let's look at the physical cloaking. Because wraiths exist almost entirely in the unseen world, they appear invisible in the physical world. The Nazgul, or Black Riders, wear black robes and armor solely to give their shapeless forms a physical presence they can interact with and terrify the living. I mean, I guess they wanted to be a little more than just a sword floating there ready to stab people.
And actually in the books, or some of the books that Tolkien wrote, it did say that they just didn't have a body sometimes. They're floating around looking for stuff without a body. And also when Elrond commanded the waves to go over them, they didn't die.
Yes,
so
they
just had
returned shapeless to Mordor, I believe.
To get a body.
Exactly.
Or to get a form, I should say.
Yeah, they needed to reform themselves. They were a little scattered. So now let's look at some of the biblical and theological parallels in this wraithhood.
So the illusion of immortal life. So Satan's original lie in Genesis, "You surely will not die," mirrors the trap of the 9 rings. The ring offered life without end, but delivered an endless shadow of living death instead of true eternal life.
It also has this spiritual emptiness to it as well. Evil in Tolkien's framework cannot create life or true substance. It can only hollow out and corrupt the existing good. A wraith represents the ultimate physical outcome of sin, a total loss of selfhood, a reduction to a shadow, and complete bondage to a false master.
So let's look at the last ring, the one for the Dark Lord, Sauron. So his fortune secret within the fires of Mount Doom. It was created to dominate the wills of all other ring bearers. Sauron poured a massive portion of his own innate power and spirit into the ring.
Before we go on, I just want to mention real quick that this is similar to what J.K. Rowling did, and I think J.K. Rowling maybe might have copied some of what Voldemort did with his Horcruxes and binding his life force to them. I think she kind of got that idea from Lord of the Rings. I may be completely off the rocker and incorrect, but I believe that is probably where she got her idea for the Horcruxes, off of Sauron binding his life force to the One Ring. So just like Harry having to destroy the Horcruxes to completely kill Voldemort, the One Ring has to be destroyed to kill Sauron.
So there's an inscription on the ring carrying the black speech of Mordor, revealed only when exposed to fire, like in the Fellowship of the Ring when Gandalf was showing Frodo that just threw it in the fire, and Frodo was like, what? Well, it was actually to show exactly the inscription of.
It's hilarious. I thought it was so funny when I saw it at the time, but they put out a Lego video game based on the movies of Lord of the Rings, and instead of putting it in the fire, the Lego Frodo accidentally drops in his coffee mug. I thought that was hilarious, because he drops in his coffee and he's fishing around trying to pull it out, and all of a sudden it starts glowing and you see the words.
So that would work too.
Yep, just throw it in a coffee mug or in the fire. But anyway, so let's look at the lineage of bearers. This ring had a lot more bearers than the other rings.
Yes, most definitely.
Yes, so obviously, of course, Sauron, the creator and true master, had it first.
And then there's Isildur. He was the first man to wield the ring of power, and he cut it from Sauron's hand. He refused to destroy it due to its immediate hold and his pride, and he sort of lost it in the Anduin
betrayed
River
him
at
and
the
he
Gladden
died.
Fields. Yeah,
He got lost in the Anduin River.
Yes.
And then later, Deagle, a creature similar to a hobbit, he found it in the river. And then Smeagol, it's the same type of creature, similar to a hobbit.
Yeah.
Smeagol, by the way, is also Gollum. He murdered Deagle for it and held the ring in darkness for over 500 years. And that ring reduced Smeagol to the hollow and addicted creature that was Gollum.
Yeah, then Bilbo Baggins, he's the next one. He sort of stole the ring from Gollum.
Well, he found it. He didn't take it from Gollum. He just found it on the ground.
Yeah, and he only used it sparingly. He became the only bearer to give it up freely, of course, with Gandalf's intervention.
Yeah.
Even him, he was pulled by the ring's power.
Yes. So, I mean, hobbits are very resilient creatures. Obviously, a little more resilient than Smeagol and Deagle. But anyway, so Frodo Baggins, obviously, was the next bearer of the ring after Bilbo Baggins. So he inherited the ring from Bilbo Baggins and became the ring bearer, entrusted to carry the ring to its destruction in Mount Doom, or Orodruin, as the elves call it.
So the next one was Samwise Gamgee. So he took it from Frodo because when assumed that Frodo was dead. And he wore it briefly near Cirith Ungol to save Frodo, and after he found out that he was alive, and surrendered it back to Frodo out of pure love and humility.
And I want to note here, Samwise, I mean, he could be the true hero of The Lord of the Rings. And many people have said similar things. So, I know, was it Kevin or I that said that Bilbo Baggins was the only one to give it up freely, but that's probably not really true. Samwise gave it up freely and gave it back to Frodo out of pure love and humility. So, Frodo had it for a while, and then Gollum again had it. He bit off Frodo's finger at Mount Doom with the ring attached to the finger, and then he fell into the fires of Mount Doom.
He only had it for what, 30 seconds long probably?
Yeah, 30, 45 seconds. Depending on how high they were up in the mountain, maybe it took 20 seconds for him to fall down and hit the lava. So maybe it was close to a minute. But he got his addiction taken care of by being burned alive. But anyway, so now let's look at some of the biblical parallels and philosophical themes within these different rings. I think about 20 rings, I believe they are. So let's look at these parallels and how some of them directly align with Tolkien's Catholic faith and world-building philosophy.
So the idolatry of power. So Sauron's goal was not mere destruction, but also,
coercive control, yeah.
Yes, ordering the world according to his personal will rather than divine harmony, like Iluvatar.
Exactly, like we mentioned in
the first episode.
Silmarillion, yeah. Eru Iluvatar is the god figure in Tolkien's works. So now I just want to mention the fall of the Elven-smiths. Celebrimbor and the elves were driven by a good desire, preserving beauty, but fell into subtlety, by trying to freeze time and escape the decay of a fallen world through illicit means.
Then let's look at possession, addiction, and slavery. So sin is a parasite. The One Ring has no creative power. It only distorts, magnifies pride, and hollows out its bearer.
Gollum really shows this well. He illustrates the literal loss of self, personhood, through long-term surrender to temptation. The ring turns a free creature into a slave to an obsession.
So grace versus works, the power of humility. So the failure of the strong is one example. Boromir, Saruman, and ultimately Frodo at the crack of doom demonstrate that no creature, no matter how noble, can overcome the ring's total temptation by sheer willpower.
Yes, and that's where providence and grace comes in. The ring is ultimately destroyed not by physical might, but through pity, mercy, and divine providence. Frodo's past mercy to Gollum and Bilbo's past mercy to Gollum leads to the ultimate outcome at Mount Doom. Sometimes it is the little choices and decisions that we make in life that really make the big difference in the end.
Talking about the end, I think it is about time to start wrapping up this episode.
I guess you're right. I could go on talking about The Lord of the Rings for hours. We should do another episode on it in the future. Before we move into the close, is there anything else that you would like to mention?
Well, I do want to thank you all listeners for listening to our podcast. We are so glad that some people have found our podcast to be informational or entertaining to listen to. Also, please leave a rating and comment on whatever podcasting platform you use. We would really appreciate it.
We also love hearing feedback from our listeners, so please reach out to us at laurenlogospodcast@gmail.com.
Yep, that email is located in the show description for easy access. Thanks.
Now let's move on to the conclusion and outro. As we wrap up, there are several important things that we want you to take away from this episode. Many people live through events that they wish had not happened within their lifetime. When catastrophes, wars, or pandemics happen is not up to them to decide. Like we said earlier, all that people who live through those times can decide is what their reaction will be. What will they do with the time and life that God has given them? It is important for people to understand that they have a limited time here on earth. What will you do with the time that God has given you? I pray that you do not waste the time that God has given you, dear listener.
As we discussed towards the beginning of the episode, several of the characters in The Lord of the Rings imitate parts of the threefold office of Christ. We too are to be imitators of Christ. Imitation is the highest form of worship. Imitate Christ and worship Him in all that you do.
The third thing I want you to take away is what we talked about in the section on friendships in Middle-earth. Love your friends with biblical love. Put their best interests above your own. If you are doing this, then you will not be manipulating them. You will not be using them for your own gain. Truthfully examine your relationships and quickly address any manipulation that may be occurring.
We mentioned that the dwarven rings inflame the evil desires of wearers. I would encourage you to look at your life and see if you can cut things out that inflame your evil desires, your fleshly lusts, and sinful behavior. While this will not fix the problem, it is a step in the right direction.
We also need to be careful to not, like the elven smiths, subtly try to freeze time to escape the decay of our fallen world through illicit means. God has placed us in the timeline that He created. Our world's decay is inevitable and has already begun. Focus instead on reaching the souls of those lost in the fallen world that we momentarily dwell in. The last application that I will mention is this. Satan offers the pleasures of this world and eternal life. But just like in the Garden of Eden when he offered Eve the apple, he lies. The only eternal thing that you will get for biting into his lies is an eternity of suffering in hell. It was the same with Sauron and the men whom he deceived. They received long life and power, but in the end they were consumed by evil and faded from the world of the living. Don't fall for Satan's tricks. Turn and flee to God. Seek refuge in Him. Repent and live for Him. Imitate Christ as we have been commanded. As I am sure you now know, both Kevin and I highly appreciate The Lord of the Rings for its story as well as its many biblical truths woven throughout. I would encourage you to buy the books, read them to your children, talk through the many themes that are woven throughout them, enjoy the detailed descriptions, revel in the magnificent plot. We would highly encourage you to read the amazing work of literary art by John Ronald Reuel Tolkien.
Dive deeply.
Think carefully.
And please enjoy the magnificent tale found in The Lord of the Rings. Excerpts and quotes from J.R.R. Tolkien's works are used in this episode under fair use for the purpose of criticism, commentary, and literary analysis. All rights belong to the Tolkien estate and published holders.
Unless otherwise noted, all scripture quotations taken from the NASB, New American Standard Bible, copyright 1971, 1995, 2020 by the Lockman Foundation, used by permission, all rights reserved.
Every claim weighed in the light of the word that's true. Read deeply, think carefully, and hold fast to what is true. Lore and logos, stories and truth, we read with care. Faithful and wise, imagination anchored in the truth that never lies. Lore and logos, so read slow, read well. Every story under heaven, measured by the word that tells. Deeply, think carefully, and hold fast to